She ran away pregnant, swearing she'd never come back. But what that horse did that afternoon, no one will ever be able to explain. What if the biggest mistake of your life was still alive, just waiting for the right moment to make you pay the price? Would you have the courage to face your mother, knowing she was the one who taught you how to run away? And what if the only being who could save your family couldn't speak, but understood everything with just one look? If you watch until the end, you'll uncover the secret buried for years at Hollow Creek Ranch, a secret soaked in pain, forgiveness, and a miracle on hooves. This isn't just a story. It's a silent scream about what truly keeps us alive and what can destroy us when we choose to look away. Get ready, because sometimes the real villain isn't who you think it is. The sun had begun to bleed into the sky, casting a deep amber glow across the hills. Dust curled beneath the slow, heavy steps of Savannah Cole as she stood at the edge of Hollow Creek Ranch. The same cracked earth that had once soaked up her childhood tears now whispered reminders of everything she had tried to forget. She didn't knock. She didn't need to. The front gate creaked as she pushed it open with a force far too gentle for someone carrying so much. 9 months pregnant, yes, but it wasn't the child that weighed her down. It was 18 years of silence, of words never spoken, of letters never sent, of a mother who chose soil over skin, and a father who vanished into it. Her breath trembled, not from the physical burden, but from standing on ground that had once been her entire world and had betrayed her with indifference. She paused at the fence post carved with her initials. Still there, still scarred. Why hadn't they erased me? Or had they tried? Her hand lingered there, fingers tracing the wood like the outline of a wound still fresh. The air smelled of cedar, horse sweat, and broken promises. In the distance, the stallions roamed like memories, untamed, watching. She looked at the porch light. Off. No welcome here. Not yet. The baby shifted inside her, like it knew it was crossing into something dangerous. Something old. She whispered to herself, low, shaky, but with a heat that could burn. This place killed me quietly once, but I didn't stay dead. Then she added, louder this time, as if to challenge the very dirt under her feet. Now I'm here to bury the past, or let it bury me. But what exactly was she walking into? Why hadn't her mother picked up the phone when she called 6 weeks ago from a payphone outside a gas station in Nashville? Why did the front door look like it hadn't opened in months? Yet the ranch itself was still running, horses still fed, fences repaired. And who had left his truck parked by the barn, even after all these years? Questions. Too many. But one question burned hotter than the rest. What if the only way out is through the very woman who broke her? A cold wind brushed past her face. She pulled her jacket tighter, not for warmth, for courage. Something moved by the stable, a shadow, an outline of something large, still watching. A horse? Or something more? No time for guesses. Not anymore. She reached the steps. 3 of them, rotted at the edges, just like the memories here. She placed one boot on the first. The creak it made was deafening. Then, slam. The front door burst open before she could even knock. And there she was, Evelyn Cole, wrinkled, sharp-eyed, weathered like the porchwood itself, holding a shotgun, not aimed, but cradled like an extension of her spine. They stood frozen. 2 women, same blood, same fire, but nothing else in common anymore. Not yet. No hello. No where have you been? Just that stare. That hard, brutal silence. Then Evelyn said, without blinking, "You picked a fine time to show up, girl." And Savannah, her voice cracking but eyes unshaken, replied, "Yeah, right before everything breaks. I came back for the pieces." But what pieces? Of herself? Of a family? Of truths no one ever wanted spoken? The air grew thick. Tension. Not yet rage. Not yet forgiveness. Just the space between. The kind of silence that makes you wonder, when did love turn into a weapon? Before Evelyn could speak again, A sound broke the standoff, sharp and distant. A low guttural neigh. From the ridge behind the barn, Savannah turned her head. Only one creature ever made that sound. Ash, still alive, still waiting? But why? And how much did that horse remember? More importantly, what else had survived here, waiting for her to return? There was no turning back. And if Savannah thought she came back to confront the past, she was wrong. The past had been waiting to confront her. The porch groaned beneath Savannah's step, as if even the house resented her return. The last rays of light stretched across the warped wood, casting long shadows that clung to every crack, every memory etched into the frame of that old place. She stood still, one hand on her swollen belly, the other gripping the railing, bracing herself, not for physical pain, but for the silence on the other side of that door. Was it still the same latch? Had Evelyn changed the locks? Would she even open it? Savannah didn't knock. She just waited, not because she was patient, but because she needed to see whether her mother chose to face her or would rather pretend she didn't exist. Seconds dragged. The wind shifted. A crow called in the distance like some bad omen. The baby shifted hard, as if reacting to something invisible. She steadied her breathing. Then the knob turned. The door opened barely. Not wide, just enough to let one bitter memory slip out. Savannah Cole stood in the threshold, aged but not softened. Her frame thinner, her posture still sharp, and her eyes hadn't changed a bit. Neither had the voice that followed. You should have called. For words. Cold. Controlled. That landed like a slap. Savannah didn't blink. She met her mother's gaze and answered with venom wrapped in calm. Like you called when you sent me away. A pause. Neither woman moved. Neither looked away. Years collapsed into seconds. There was no embrace. No apology. Just the old invisible wall between them. Built brick by brick with every lie, every silence, every cruel decision dressed as necessity. Evelyn finally stepped aside, allowing just enough room for Savannah to enter. Not out of warmth, but obligation. Savannah walked in, slow, cautious. The air inside was thick with a smell she remembered too well. Old wood, leather saddles, dried sage, and something else. Was that whiskey? She glanced at the side table near the staircase. The bottle was still there, half empty, so some things hadn't changed. The door clicked shut behind her. The sound felt final. You're early, Evelyn said flatly. Due date's still 2 weeks away, isn't it? Life doesn't follow calendars, Mama, Savannah replied. Especially not mine. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if to remind her, you don't have time for pride. But Evelyn had never been one to read signs, or feel them. She walked into the living room like it was just another day, like her daughter hadn't vanished from her life 18 years ago, like Savannah hadn't bled out alone in a hospital restroom during her first miscarriage while Evelyn was training colts 2 states away. You hungry? Savannah almost laughed. The absurdity of it. Hunger? That was the word her mother reached for. No, she said, but thank for asking. 18 years too late. That one hit. Barely, but enough for Evelyn's right eye to twitch. Still, she didn't stop moving. Kept straightening already perfect pillows on the couch. Kept avoiding eye contact. That's when Savannah noticed it. The picture frame on the mantel. She stepped closer. Her photo was gone, replaced by a stallion. Ash, her father's horse. The one that refused to be ridden after he disappeared. You took me down, Savannah said, voice low. But you left him up. Evelyn didn't answer. Just stood there, rigid. The silence stretched long. Tense. Then Evelyn turned and said, quiet, sharp, you didn't come here for closure. You came here to punish me. Savannah's breath caught. Not because it wasn't true, but because, what if it was? Maybe, she said. Maybe I came to find out who hurt me more. You, or the man you married. Evelyn's face turned pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Why? What was she holding back? A secret? A name? A truth too dangerous to say? Savannah didn't press. Not yet. But the way Evelyn looked at her, like a person caught in the act, set something off inside her. "Wait," Savannah said. "Where is he?" No answer. "Mama, where the hell is Blake?" Evelyn stared at her, then turned away. And in that moment, Savannah knew her mother wasn't just hiding the past. She was protecting someone, or something, right now. And the real question wasn't why she didn't open the door sooner. It was, what was she trying to keep from walking out? The house was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that has weight to it, like dust hanging in still air, too stubborn to move, too old to be noticed anymore. Landon stood near the hallway entrance, halfway between the past and the present. The walls around him were covered in frames, but none of them smiled. Not a single picture in that room looked like it belonged to a family that laughed together. He scanned them one by one. Evelyn on horseback, eyes cold and distant. His mother, younger, caught mid-step in a photo from a high school rodeo. And farther back, one black and white image of a man he barely recognized. His grandfather? No one ever spoke his name. Not once. Not even when Landon asked. Now he knew why. That silence was a tradition in this house. Passed down like an heirloom no one wanted to inherit. Behind him, the low rumble of voices grew louder. Not yelling, not yet, but sharp. "You left without a word, Savannah," Evelyn said, her voice firm. "You think that didn't cut me too? Don't talk about being hurt," Savannah shot back. "Not when I spent 2 years in a shelter trying to forget the sound of your voice." That was when Landon stepped fully into the room. They hadn't even noticed him there. They never did. Not when they were too busy blaming each other for scars that never stopped bleeding. He looked at both women. The mother who raised him with love and caution, and the grandmother who was nothing more than a name and a warning for most of his life. And then, softly but clearly, he asked, "Do we inherit everything? Even the anger?" Savannah froze. Evelyn looked at him for the first time like he wasn't just furniture in the room. "I mean, you both say you're protecting me," he continued, "but all I see are 2 people fighting a war that started before I was born. And I'm the one waking up every day with the smoke in my lungs." No one spoke. His words weren't loud, but they hit like gunfire. Savannah opened her mouth, closed it. Evelyn turned her back, gripping the edge of the sideboard, staring at the photo of the man Landon didn't know. He walked over to it. "Is that him?" Landon asked. No answer. "Is that my grandfather?" Still nothing. Then Evelyn said something so quiet, so strangled, it didn't sound like her at all. "He's not who you think he was." Landon looked at her. "I don't think he was anything. You never let me." That's when Savannah stepped forward. "You don't need to know him," she said. "You've got me." But Landon's eyes didn't leave the photograph, because in that moment, he realized something both women hadn't even seen yet. This wasn't just about old wounds. It was about what had been kept from him. About why Savannah ran. About why Evelyn never chased her. About the things they didn't say. The real question now was, what happened between those 2 women that made both of them pretend the man in that photo never existed? And if the truth finally came out, would it destroy what little family they had left? Or had it already? The door creaked open with the sound of wood giving up, slow, aching, like it had been waiting for this moment far too long. Savannah stepped inside her old bedroom, and for a few seconds, it felt like the world held its breath. Same faded pink walls, same quilt on the bed with the stitched initials SC in the corner. The bookshelf was still there, lined with stories she once devoured to escape everything this house refused to give. A ceramic horse stood on the nightstand, one ear chipped, just as she had left it the day she ran, 17 and raw, never planning to look back. But looking around now, she realized something deeper than shock. Nothing had moved, not a single frame. Not one piece of her life had been touched. The space was frozen, like a shrine. But shrines are built for the dead, and she wasn't dead. Not yet. They left everything where it was, she whispered to the silence. Everything but the love. She sat on the edge of the bed. The springs groaned beneath her, like even they didn't recognize her anymore. Her eyes fell on the closet door. Closed. Her chest tightened. Her legs trembled, but she stood. Every step toward it felt heavier than the last. When she opened it, she found boxes stacked neatly inside. Clothes she hadn't worn since high school. Boots with her name written in Sharpie on the soles. Letters she had written to boys she never mailed. A tiara from her last rodeo, bent and dull. Everything was still hers, but nothing felt like it belonged. Then she saw it. A small cardboard box labeled "Do Not Open." Taped twice. Her handwriting. She didn't remember sealing it. She didn't even remember what was inside. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside were two things. A Polaroid photo of her, age 12, smiling wide beside her father, Earl Cole. His arm around her shoulder, his hand holding hers, and beneath it a note, written in block letters with shaky pressure. She lied. He didn't leave us. He left her. Savannah stared at the note. Her breath hitched. This wasn't hers. This wasn't her handwriting. Her stomach flipped. Who had written it? And when? She checked the back of the photo. A date, July 14th, 2006. Just 3 weeks before Earl Cole vanished from the ranch. Savannah sat down slowly, the baby pressing hard against her ribs now, as if reacting to the weight of the moment. Her mind raced. Evelyn always said Earl disappeared. She said he left in the middle of the night, didn't even take his boots. Said he left a woman and a child behind like they were nothing. But this note, this one sentence, fractured that entire memory. She lied. The words played again and again in her head. Had Evelyn sent him away? Was she the reason he vanished? Was the real story about him abandoning Savannah, or about Evelyn forcing him to? The door behind her creaked. Savannah spun around, eyes wide. No one was there, or at least no one she could see. But something had changed. The air, the weight of the silence. Something wasn't just wrong here. Something was being hidden. And for the first time since she came back, Savannah knew. This room wasn't just a memory. It was a message, left untouched for a reason. But the question was, what else had her mother locked away? And who else had the key? The kitchen smelled of old coffee grounds, pine wood polish, and time. Evelyn Cole stood alone under a flickering bulb that hadn't been changed since before last Christmas. The kettle on the stove whined, softly at first, then louder, like something trying to speak after too many years of silence. But Evelyn didn't move. Her hands were locked around a chipped ceramic mug, cold and dry. The cupboards were still arranged exactly how she liked. Neat, symmetrical, controlled, as if control had ever saved her. She stared at the counter, jaw tight, knuckles white. The kettle shrieked now, piercing, angry. She still didn't move, because she wasn't in that kitchen anymore. She was back at the fence, watching Earl ride off. No goodbye, no explanation, just dust and a broken word. Then again, maybe he had said goodbye. Maybe he had explained. Maybe the truth had always been there, but she'd buried it so deep that even she stopped believing it existed. She finally turned the stove off. The whistle stopped. The silence returned, too sudden, too loud. She poured the hot water into the mug, though she had no tea bag in it. She didn't care. It wasn't about drinking. It was about doing something with her hands, about keeping them from shaking. She sat at the table across from the empty chair, not the one Savannah used to sit in, the other one, the one she never let anyone sit in after July 2006. Evelyn looked straight at it now, like it still belonged to him. "I did what I could," she said aloud. Her voice cracked, and it was never enough. She wasn't talking to the chair. She was talking to whatever still echoed in that room when everyone else was asleep. She reached into the drawer and pulled out a folded napkin. Inside it, 2 gold rings. One was hers. The other, she slid his across the table like it might come back to her, like it might finally answer. "You left me with the ranch," she whispered, "but not the truth." Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. She never did. Tears were for the weak. At least, that's what her mother taught her. But she was starting to wonder, what if being strong had only ever made her cruel? She looked at the hallway. Savannah was here. In that room, sleeping, or maybe lying awake, drowning in the same questions Evelyn had never dared to answer. Was this her last chance? Was she already too late? Or had she been the reason Savannah ran in the first place? And more terrifying still, would telling the truth now do more harm than keeping it buried? She closed her hand over the rings. Her lips trembled. If you'd stayed, would she have turned out different? The silence replied, as always, with nothing. Because the only voices left in that house were the ones that were never heard when they mattered. And as Evelyn stood from the table and placed his ring back in the drawer, she didn't notice the figure watching her from the hallway. Landon, frozen, eyes wide. He had heard everything. But what would he do with it? And how long had he been listening? The sun was slipping behind the barn, casting a burnished orange glow across the front porch. But the heat in the air had nothing to do with weather. Evelyn stood at the edge of the porch, arms crossed, face set like concrete. Her eyes were narrowed, watchful, cold. Savannah paced the wooden boards, back and forth like a caged animal. The baby in her belly pressed hard against her spine, but she barely noticed. Her jaw was locked, her fists clenched. Landon stood a few feet away, eyes darting between them. The air was thick with everything they had never said. "You're still trying to act like it didn't happen," Savannah barked. "I did what I had to do," Evelyn snapped back. "No, you did what was easy for you." Savannah stepped forward, the boards creaking under her boots. "You buried him, you buried me, and you kept this place running like nothing was broken." Evelyn's lips barely moved. Her voice was low and flat. "Not everything is about you, Savannah." The words hit like a slap. Landon flinched. Savannah stopped pacing, turned slowly. Her voice dropped. "You're right. Not everything was about me. That's the damn problem." She took one step closer to her mother. "You picked the ranch. You picked the horses. You even picked him, over and over again. But you never picked me. Not once." Evelyn's eyes flickered, briefly. But she didn't back down. "You don't know what it was like. You were a child. I was your child," Savannah exploded. "And you treated me like a damn burden you couldn't wait to offload." Her chest heaved. Her hand trembled as she pointed toward the stables. "You'd rather sleep in the hay than hold me after nightmares. You'd rather mend fences than mend what you broke in me." Landon opened his mouth to speak, stopped. The words got stuck in his throat like splinters. Evelyn took a deep breath. But before she could say anything, Savannah moved forward fast. The baby shifted violently in her belly. Pain stabbed her side. She stumbled slightly, but kept going. She stood toe-to-toe with Evelyn. "You think you're strong? Cold doesn't mean strong. It just means you were too scared to feel." "Don't talk to me about fear," Evelyn shot back. "You don't know what fear is until you've watched everything you built fall apart because of one damn choice." "You mean one damn lie?" The silence that followed was the kind that burns. Then Evelyn leaned in, her voice razor-thin. "You don't know the whole story. Maybe because you never told it." In a single breathless second, Savannah's hand shot forward and pushed. It wasn't hard, but it didn't have to be. Evelyn's foot slipped on the edge of the porch board. Her arms flailed, briefly, before her body hit the ground below with a brutal thud. "Mom!" Landon screamed, running to her side. Dust rose in a slow-motion cloud as Evelyn groaned and rolled onto her side. Savannah froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Her fingers still trembled in the air where the push had happened. Her mind was screaming, "What have I done?" Evelyn clutched her ribs, but her glare was sharper than the pain. "There it is," she rasped. "That temper, just like his." Savannah's face went white. "What did you say?" Evelyn winced but didn't flinch. "You heard me." Landon looked between them, horrified. "Wait, like who?" No answer, just the wind scraping through the dry grass. Evelyn's face twisted, not just from pain, but from something darker, something old. Savannah backed up one step, then two. Her legs shook, because in that moment, the weight of what Evelyn said, what she didn't say, pressed down like a hammer. "You've been lying to me my whole life," Savannah said, her voice low. Evelyn didn't reply, but her silence screamed. Landon stood over his grandmother, tears welling in his eyes. What the hell is going on? Savannah didn't answer either. She just turned, walked inside the house, and slammed the door. But behind that slam wasn't closure. It was something else. A crack in everything. And something was about to crawl through. The wind shifted. It wasn't a gust. It was more like a change in pressure. A tension settling into the dry grass, the rusted fences, the brittle wooden posts that lined the boundary of Hollow Creek like tired sentinels. And Ash felt it. He stood alone at the far end of the pasture, where the earth cracked beneath hooves and nothing but stubborn weeds dared to grow. His ears flicked forward, nostrils flared. The air smelled wrong. His eyes, dark and deep like ancient stone, fixed on the house. A faint sound had reached him, not the usual shouting of ranch hands or the rumble of the old tractor. This was sharper, human, raw, a cry. Or maybe it wasn't a cry. Maybe it was the sound of something breaking. He turned toward the barn, but no one was there. The gate was latched. The sun was low, catching flecks of dust that hovered above the field like ash. Then another sound, a thud, then stillness. His muscles tensed. He pulled against the post. Once, twice. On the third pull, the leather reins snapped with a sharp crack, and the sound echoed like a warning bell through the silence of the land. Ash didn't wait. He ran, not like a horse startled, like something with purpose. His hooves tore through the soil, sending dry dirt into the air. Each stride was heavy and deliberate, like he wasn't just moving, he was answering. From the porch, Landon saw him first. "Mom!" He gasped, his voice breaking. Savannah turned just in time to see the massive form of Ash cutting through the field, his chest broad, his legs pounding with fury. Dust swirled behind him, catching the last light of the sun and casting his outline in something almost unreal. She staggered back a step. Evelyn, still on the ground, froze completely, because they both knew Ash didn't run like that. Not for years. Not since he left. Savannah remembered the last time she saw that horse move like this. She was 16. There had been a storm coming. Earl had grabbed the reins, climbed into the saddle, and told her he needed to check the far ridge. He never came back, and Ash never ran again. Until now. The stallion reached the yard and stopped just short of the steps. His breath heaved. Steam rose from his flanks. He pawed the ground once, twice, and then stood still, head high, ears forward, eyes locked on Savannah. Landon whispered it under his breath. It's like he knew. No one moved. Then Ash took one step forward, and another. He placed himself directly between Evelyn and Savannah, not as an animal responding to sound, but as something else entirely. A barrier, a shield, a question. What did this horse remember that no one else dared to speak? Evelyn pushed herself up slowly, her lip trembling, not from pain, but from something that looked a lot like recognition. "Why now?" she breathed. Savannah didn't answer. She couldn't, because deep down, a terrifying thought was blooming. What if Ash had never stopped waiting? Not for Earl, but for this moment? And if that was true, what exactly had been kept from him? What had this animal seen? And even more unsettling, what was he protecting her from now? Ash didn't blink. He stood tall in the dirt, chest rising and falling like a bellows, sweat glistening along his flank, nostrils flaring. Every part of him was ready, not to run, not to flee, but to hold the line. Between them, Savannah was on the porch, one hand trembling against the rail, the other instinctively resting on her stomach, as if trying to quiet the storm inside her. Her breath came in shallow bursts. Her mind raced with everything that had just collapsed. Words, truths, violence she never wanted to repeat, but had let slip from her hands. And there, in the dirt, Evelyn slowly pulled herself up, one palm pressed into the earth, teeth clenched against the pain searing through her side. Her breath was heavy. Her eyes, dark and wet with something she wouldn't name, locked on the animal now standing between her and her daughter. Ash didn't move. He didn't need to. His body said everything. He turned his head, slowly, deliberately, one eye fixed on Savannah, the other keeping Evelyn in view. A sentinel, a line neither woman dared to cross. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind dragging dry leaves across the porch floor. Then a single sharp breath from Evelyn. "He's not yours," she said, voice rough. He was his. But the second the name tried to enter the space, Ash's ear twitched, and he stepped forward, not toward Evelyn, toward her voice. Evelyn froze. Her breath caught. "Don't," she muttered, almost involuntarily. Ash stopped, but only for a moment. Then, hoof by hoof, he backed up again, returning to his place, his post, right between them. And that's when Savannah said it. Quiet, more to herself than to anyone else. Sometimes the ones who don't speak are the only ones who know what to do. Her voice cracked at the end, but she didn't cry. She couldn't afford to, because something about this felt bigger than her, bigger than them all. Like Ash wasn't just standing there as a horse. He was witnessing something, guarding something. But what? What was he protecting her from? Or worse, what truth was he trying to keep from being exposed? Evelyn stepped forward, wincing, but the second her boot touched the edge of Ash's stance, he shifted. Not aggressively, just enough to make a point. She paused, swallowed hard. "He was there that night," she whispered. "When it happened. When—" She stopped herself, bit the words off. Savannah leaned forward. "When what happened?" Ash didn't move, didn't flinch. He just waited, like he knew the next words would unravel something neither of them were ready to hear. Evelyn's face broke just slightly. Not a sob, not a tear, just a fissure, like a fault line about to rupture. "If you knew what I did," she breathed, "you'd never forgive me." Savannah's heart pounded in her ears. "Then tell me." Evelyn opened her mouth, but Ash pawed the dirt once. The sound silenced her again, because maybe, just maybe, Ash knew what she was about to say wasn't the full truth. Not yet. And the deeper question hung there, impossible to ignore. What did this animal remember that everyone else had worked so hard to forget? Oh, ChatGPT's. The sound came before the sight. A low, guttural growl of tires grinding against gravel. Not fast, not rushed. Slow, calculated. A predator that didn't need to run to make you feel hunted. Savannah was still standing on the porch, her hand white-knuckled around the rail, Ash unmoving by her side. Landon sat by Evelyn, who had finally managed to sit upright, her breathing shallow, her face pale, her silence louder than any scream. Then the SUV came into view. Jet black, gleaming, too clean for a place like Hollow Creek. It didn't belong, but the man behind the wheel always made it feel like it did. The vehicle came to a complete stop without a single bounce of suspension. The driver's door creaked open. A leather boot hit the dirt. Blake Maddox, pressed slacks, white shirt rolled to the elbows, damp at the armpits. His sleeves clung to sinewy arms that had built empires but destroyed people faster. His face, hard angles, clean shave, and eyes like polished steel. Cold, purposeful, devoid of apology. He stepped out fully, shutting the door behind him without looking back. In one hand, his phone, which he slid into his blazer pocket. In the other, a coiled black leather whip. Savannah didn't move. Her throat tightened. Her pulse kicked in her ears. Blake scanned the yard. Not with confusion. He had no questions. He knew something had gone wrong. But what he was measuring now wasn't the what. It was the how hard he needed to hit to fix it. "Looks like I missed story time," he said, voice dry. No one answered. Landon stood. Ash shifted, one hoof pressing deeper into the dirt. Blake's eyes landed on the horse. "You let that thing loose." He nodded once towards Savannah. Of course he did. Always did like animals more than people. He walked slowly, each step deliberate. Savannah stepped down from a porch. "Don't come any closer." "Savannah," Blake said, almost amused. "Drop the performance. We both know how this ends." "You mean with you getting back in that car before something happens you can't control?" That got his attention. He stopped 5 feet away from Ash and laughed. A short, sharp sound that died fast. Control? You think I don't have it? He raised the whip, not striking, just letting it uncoil in the air like a threat made of sound. It's time to come home. Enough playing house with ghosts. This is home, she snapped. It always was. You were just the detour I had to survive. The words landed. Blake's expression shifted, but not to anger, to something darker. You have no idea what you just said. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but every syllable hit like gravel in the gut. You think you know where you came from? Who you are? He glanced at Evelyn. Ask your mother. Ask her about July 12th, 2006. Evelyn's eyes widened, but she didn't speak. Ask her, Blake repeated, louder now. Ask her who made the call. Ask her what price she paid to keep you safe. Savannah looked at Evelyn. What is he talking about? Evelyn looked away. That's when Ash stepped forward again, not charging, just placing himself closer to Blake than anyone expected. A warning. Blake met the horse's eyes. For the first time, something flickered behind his own. This thing, he muttered, tightening his grip on the whip. It always hated me. Maybe it just saw what the rest of us were too afraid to name. Savannah said, steady. Blake took one more step forward. Ash stomped once. Loud. The sound cracked the air. Everyone froze. Blake's hand dropped slightly. He exhaled once. Then, with barely a glance back, he turned and walked to the SUV. But just before stepping in, he said one last thing. You think this is over? You're standing on a land built on lies. And I own them. Then he drove off. Dust rose. Savannah stood frozen, heart pounding. Ash turned his head slowly toward her. Landon whispered, What the hell happened on July 12th? No one answered. But Evelyn's hand slipped to her side, pressing hard where the pain still pulsed. Because the past had just knocked again. And next time, it might not leave so easily. What was the secret so dangerous Blake could weaponize it? And why had Evelyn kept it buried for nearly 2 decades? The gravel still danced in the air from Blake's tires, settling slowly like ash across the broken porch steps. But the dust wasn't the only thing suspended. Savannah was on the ground, one knee planted in dirt, the other leg extended awkwardly beneath her, skirt torn, elbow bleeding. A smear of red ran from her forearm down to her palm, mixing with the earth and grit. Her breath came shallow, uneven, not just from pain, from fury, from something older and harder than fear. Blake stood 3 feet away, whip in hand, fingers twitching. His knuckles were tight enough to turn bone white beneath his skin. The veins along his neck pulsed with something dangerous, not rage, but calculation. The same calculation he used in boardrooms when breaking competitors with a single clause in a contract. But here, now, it wasn't paper he wanted to rip. It was her. Ash, just behind Savannah, remained still alert. His ears trained on Blake. His flank glistened with sweat, his muscles coiled and ready, but unmoving. Waiting. Landon was on the porch, too stunned to speak, too afraid to move. Evelyn watched from where she sat, slumped against the porch rail, eyes locked on Blake, but expression unreadable, like she'd seen this before, because maybe she had. Get up, Blake said, his voice low and sharp, like a rusted nail dragged across glass. Savannah didn't move, not because she couldn't, because she refused. She pressed her hand into the dirt and rose slowly, face tilted up toward him. Blood dripped from her arm, soaking into the waistband of her dress. The baby inside her shifted again, almost violently, but she didn't flinch. She was trembling, but she stood, straight, tall, wounded, yes, but unbroken. You don't get to walk in here like you still own something, she said. Not this land, not this house, and sure as hell not me. Blake laughed. One cold, empty sound. You think standing in front of a horse and throwing words makes you strong? He asked. You have no idea how close you are to losing everything. Then take one more step, Savannah said. Her voice wasn't loud, but cut deeper than a scream. Go on, try it. Take one more step, and there won't be anything left of me for you to destroy. But I won't back up. I won't ever back up again. For the first time, Blake hesitated. Not from fear, from realization. The woman in front of him wasn't the same girl who used to ask permission to speak. She wasn't the wife who watched his lies build walls around her life. She wasn't the frightened voice on the phone when he'd hung up halfway through her crying. This woman had come back from something, and she hadn't come back alone. Behind her, Ash stepped forward just once, enough to make the dirt shift beneath Blake's shoes. Blake's grip on the whip loosened, then tightened again. "You think this ends with words?" he asked. "You think I came here to talk?" "No," Savannah replied, eyes steady. "You came here to see if I'd still let you win. And now you know the answer." Blake stared at her for a long beat. The sun dipped behind the tree line, leaving just the red smear of dusk over the fields. A thin line of sweat ran down his temple. The silence pressed like a weight across his back, but still, he didn't move. Until Evelyn spoke. Her voice was raw, thin, but what she said sliced through the air like a blade. "She's not the one who should be afraid." Blake turned to her slowly. "What does that mean?" Evelyn didn't answer, but her eyes said something else, something that made Blake freeze. It wasn't Savannah's strength that rattled him. It was what Evelyn knew, and had just threatened to say. The whip dropped. Blake looked at his hand like it had betrayed him. He stepped back. One step, two, then turned toward the SUV. No words, just the sound of a man retreating. Savannah's knees nearly buckled. She gripped the porch railing with bloodied fingers and exhaled, one breath away from collapse. Ash stood by her side now, close enough for her to feel the heat from his body, steady, silent, unshakable. But before anyone could breathe fully again, Landon stepped forward, pointing down at the ground where Blake had been standing. "There's something in the dirt." Savannah knelt, ignoring the ache in her joints. She dug with trembling hands until her fingers struck something hard. Metal. She pulled it up. A key. Old. Worn. Burned at the edges. Attached to it, a rusted tag. Box 12/July 2006. Savannah's heart stopped. She looked up at Evelyn, who had gone pale. "What the hell is this?" Evelyn didn't answer. Not because she didn't know, but because she did. And whatever that key opened, it wasn't just a box. It was everything they were never supposed to find. Oh, ChatGPT's. The dirt shifted beneath hooves that had known restraint for far too long. Ash had remained still as long as he could, longer than instinct told him was safe. But instinct wasn't what drove him now. It was something deeper. Blake had returned from the SUV, his expression coiled tighter than the leather in his fist. The whip hung low at his side like an extension of his anger, silent but waiting. Savannah stood behind Ash, bruised, bleeding but upright. Evelyn had said nothing since the key was found. Not because she had nothing to say, because there were things she couldn't say. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Landon was on the porch, eyes wide, lips parted, arms ready to reach, and too afraid to. And Blake? He stepped closer. Too close. "Move that damn horse." He sat low. Sharp. Not a request. Ash didn't blink. Didn't flinch. He simply raised his head higher. Ears back. Tail low. Muscles locked. Blake laughed under his breath. "You think this thing scares me?" He took one more step forward, and the earth answered. Ash reared. His front legs exploded off the ground. Dust rose like smoke, clouds billowing around them. His body lifted to full height, chest broad as a truck grill, hooves slicing through air like warning shots. Savannah didn't move. Landon held his breath. And for the first time in the entire confrontation, Blake stepped back. Just one step. But it was enough. Enough to change something. Because Ash didn't rear like a wild animal. He didn't lash out like something panicked. He stood tall, held the pose, let his shadow fall long over Blake's boots. It wasn't aggression. It was command. And the message was clear. This ends here. You go no further. Blake's jaw tightened. The whip in his hand quivered. He could strike. But if he did, they all knew what would happen. Not just the physical blowback. Not just the possibility of a horse reacting with instinct and force. but something more dangerous. Everyone watching would know he had lost. He lowered the whip, just barely. Ash came down slowly, his front hooves kissing the earth in a way that seemed impossible for something his size. And Blake exhaled, not in relief, in surrender, not out loud, but it was there, in the tension draining from his shoulders, in a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. He looked at Savannah, then Evelyn, then Ash. He turned without a word. This time, he didn't just walk away. He retreated. The moment cracked open something no one expected. Landon stepped off the porch, slowly, like waking from trance. Did he just— Yes, Savannah said. Her voice shook, but it was steady. He did. Ash stood still, eyes still locked on Blake's retreating back. And Evelyn, she closed her eyes, as if realizing something too late. He's not afraid of men, she said quietly. But he remembers one. Savannah turned. Remembers who? Evelyn opened her eyes, but the words caught. Because the answer wasn't Blake. And if it wasn't Blake, who was Ash remembering? When he rose like that, and more terrifying still, what had that man done? That even a horse couldn't forget? Oh, ChatGPT Dees. Blake's fingers curled around the handle of the whip like it was the only thing holding his world together. The sun hovered low, casting long streaks of gold across the packed dirt yard of Hollow Creek. Not a single sound. Not from the birds, not from the breeze. Even the insects knew to stay silent. Ash stood unmoving, his nostrils flaring slightly, steam curling from them like a warning signal. He wasn't blocking Blake's path with violence. He didn't need to. It was presence. Raw, unmoving, undeniable. Behind the horse, Savannah stood with one hand over her abdomen, the other gripping the porch rail. Blood dried at the corner of her mouth, and still, she didn't look away. She had already lost too much to blink now. Blake shifted his weight. The whip drooped slightly at his side. Every eye on the property was watching, but no one dared speak, because everyone knew something was coming. Would Blake strike? Would Ash react? Would Savannah fall? But instead, Blake looked down. He stared at the whip in his hand like it didn't belong to him anymore, like it had betrayed him just by being there. Then, slowly, almost like he couldn't believe it himself, he opened his hand, and the whip slipped through his fingers. It didn't crash to the dirt. It didn't slap the ground. It just landed, soft, silent, the kind of fall that's too heavy for noise. He stood there, looking at it, as if waiting for it to speak, as if it might beg him to pick it back up and finish what he started. But it didn't. No one moved. Ash didn't break eye contact, and Blake took a step back, then another, then turned, not in anger, not in defiance, but in surrender. He walked to the SUV, opened the door, got in, and left. No words, no last threats, no promises to return. Just the sound of tires kicking up dust as he disappeared down the driveway. The silence he left behind wasn't empty. It was charged, heavy, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. Savannah finally breathed. Evelyn leaned against the doorframe, her face unreadable, and Ash lowered his head. Only then did Landon speak, his voice a whisper, like he was afraid to disturb whatever spell had just broken. Why did he let go? Savannah's lips parted. No answer, because maybe it wasn't fear. Maybe it wasn't guilt. Maybe Blake saw something in Ash's eyes that reminded him of someone who used to look at him that way. But who? And why did the whip fall only now? After everything he had already done? What finally cracked him? And what would happen the next time he decided to pick it back up? The old rocking chair creaked under Evelyn's weight as the wind swept dry leaves across the porch. The light had shifted. It was late afternoon now, and everything around them looked faded, as if time itself had worn out its color. Savannah stood frozen at the door, blood still crusted on her lip, her hand resting on her swollen stomach. Evelyn didn't look up. Her hands trembled as she reached beneath the seat cushion. When they returned, they held something wrapped in a hand-stitched cloth. The edges were frayed, and a single corner was stained with something dark. Wine? Ink? No, deeper. Something more permanent. She extended the bundle without meeting Savannah's gaze. A pause. Then, in a voice that carried more gravel than air, "Read. And after that, decide if you still hate me." Savannah hesitated. The object in front of her felt heavier than it should have. Not by weight, but by what it might contain. She took it anyway, carefully unwrapping the cloth until a small, red leather-bound notebook emerged. No title, just initials burned into the corner. EC. She opened the first page. Handwriting. Tight, precise, then messy. As if written in fear. Or urgency. September 3rd. I should have run with her that night. I should have never trusted Blake. I watched him lie to her face, and I stayed silent because I thought I was protecting her. Savannah blinked. Her fingers turned the pages slowly, like each one might detonate. There were names, Blake's, her father's, hers. Dates, events she remembered, but from Evelyn's perspective, everything looked different. She kept reading. He didn't just threaten me. He bought silence. He leveraged everything. My mortgage, my reputation, even Savannah's trust. I was a coward. I still am. Her heart raced. There were letters never sent. Apologies never voiced. Even photographs folded into the center. Images of a much younger Evelyn holding a newborn in a hospital gown. Her own face. But the man next to her? Not Blake. Who was he? Savannah stepped back, clutching the diary to her chest, her breath sharp and uneven. "Who is this man?" she asked, holding up the photo. Her voice cracked. Evelyn looked up then, finally, and for the first time there was something different in her eyes. Not defensiveness, not shame, just grief. "That's your father," she said. "Your real father." The floor dropped out from under her. She had spent years believing one story. That Blake had stepped in after her biological dad vanished. That Evelyn had married him out of loneliness. But this? A full betrayal of the narrative she had clung to. "He never abandoned us," Evelyn continued. "He was forced out." "By who?" Savannah's voice was a whisper now. Another silence. Then Evelyn's answer came, soft and terrifying. "By Blake. And I let him." The porch was no longer a safe place. The rocking chair, the quiet breeze, none of it meant peace now. Only questions. If Evelyn had allowed Blake to erase her father, what else had she been complicit in? And more importantly, if Savannah's entire life was built on a lie, who was she really? What else had that red notebook buried inside? And was she truly ready to uncover it all, even if it meant destroying what little was left of her past? Or worse, what if the worst part of the story hadn't been written yet? The room was small, lit only by the dull flicker of a worn-out lamp on the nightstand. The fabric of the old shade was torn, casting strange shadows on the peeling wallpaper. Savannah sat on the edge of the bed, legs slightly trembling, one hand resting on her belly, the other clutching the red diary, like it might burn her if she let go. Outside, crickets filled the silence. Inside, only the sound of pages turning. Every page read like a confession never meant to be heard. Secrets sealed behind years of silence now spilled over the paper with ink that had long dried, but words that were still bleeding. I said those things so she would hate me. Because if she hated me, she'd leave. And if she left, maybe she'd be safe. Savannah blinked hard. How many times had she replayed those arguments in her head? The screaming, the slammed doors, the nights she'd cried herself to sleep believing she was unwanted, discarded. But now, line after line, she began to see that her mother hadn't abandoned her. She had sacrificed her, not to another man, but to an illusion of safety. She flipped to the next page. When Blake grabbed her arm at the fair, I wanted to scream, but I stayed silent. He said if I intervened again, it would be me in the hospital, not him. Savannah's jaw clenched. The county fair. She had been 12. That night had haunted her. Blake's iron grip, the look on Evelyn's face blank, detached like a mask. Now she knew why. Her mother had seen it happening and chose not to stop it. Not because she didn't care, but because she believed silence was the only shield left. Savannah closed the diary for a moment, pressing it to her chest. A question spun through her mind with painful clarity. If love meant staying silent while your child suffered, was that still love? Or was it cowardice dressed in devotion? She stood slowly, her breath unsteady. The light from the lamp flickered again, revealing something she hadn't noticed. A folded sheet tucked into the back pocket of the diary. It was newer, different paper, written in rushed, erratic handwriting. If anything happens to me, this is for Savannah. Give it to her. Tell her it was never hate. There was no signature, but she recognized the handwriting. It wasn't Evelyn's. It was her father's. Her real father. The man she thought had disappeared. The man Evelyn claimed had been forced away. Why was he writing letters to be given after Evelyn's death? Her heart pounded. Had he been closer than she ever knew? And more urgently, what had actually happened to him? She turned to the final line of the letter. Don't trust the man in the black truck. He's not who he pretends to be. She gasped. Blake drove a black truck, but she remembered something strange. 2 years ago, she had seen that exact truck parked outside her apartment in Houston. She had chalked it up to coincidence. But now it felt like something far more dangerous. She looked toward the window. The curtains swayed gently, and the sound came, barely audible. A car engine, idling just down the dirt road. Was it him? Had he been watching them this entire time? And if so, what else had he taken from them that wasn't in the diary yet? The hallway was quiet. Too quiet for a house that had echoed with screaming just days before. A makeshift table, really just an old door laid across 2 crates, stood against the wall. On top, a crayon box lay open, scattered colors missing their wrappers, their tips worn flat from pressure. A wrinkled piece of paper was taped down, curling at the corners from the humidity. Landon sat in front of it, his back straight, eyes locked in focus. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His little hand, steady for once, moved with care across the page. Not fast, not nervous, intentional. Brown crayon in one hand, blue one in the other. Savannah watched him from the doorway. She didn't interrupt. She just watched, wondering what picture could possibly require that much concentration from a boy who never sat still for more than 5 minutes. A boy who had seen things no child should have to decode with crayons. What was he trying to draw out of his memory? What truth couldn't be said in words, but needed to be told anyway? Finally, Landon put the crayons down. He stared at the drawing for a moment. Then he turned to Savannah and said, "It's Ash, between you and him." Her throat tightened. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Landon pointed. There it was, clear as day. He had drawn 3 figures. One was unmistakably Savannah, her hair in a bun, her arms up like she was shielding something. The other was Blake, his outline bigger, jagged, arms stiff like claws. But in the center was Ash, the horse, eyes wide, legs grounded like roots, his body between them. Ash wasn't rearing, wasn't angry. He was still, calm, but unmovable. The space around him colored in lighter tones. Blues, soft greens. Landon smiled faintly. It's how I want to remember this day, with courage in the middle. Savannah's knees buckled, and she slid down the wall until she sat on the floor. That small sentence, delivered so plainly, so innocently, hit harder than any slap Blake had ever thrown. Because Landon saw it, all of it, not just the fear, not just the chaos. He saw the line that had been drawn, not with words, but with presence. He saw where the strength had come from when she couldn't find her own. He saw what neither adult had the courage to admit, that sometimes the bravest heart in the room doesn't speak. It simply stands. But then Savannah looked closer at the drawing, and her chest tightened. There was something else. On Blake's figure, there was a shadow, a 4th shape hidden behind him. Faint, almost like an outline of another person. A presence. She blinked. "Who's that behind Blake?" she asked, pointing carefully. Landon's face changed. He looked down, hesitated, then said softly, "The man from the road." He watches when Daddy's not looking. Savannah froze. What do you mean? What man, Landon? He didn't answer. He just pressed a new crayon onto the page, black this time, and started outlining the shape behind Blake again, this time darker, firmer. The figure didn't have a face, just a hat, and a hand that reached toward Blake's shoulder. A hand that looked like it was guiding him, or controlling him. Savannah's heart pounded. Was it just a child's imagination? Or had Landon seen something the adults had ignored? Something behind all the chaos, all the pain. Someone no one had noticed until now. And the real question, if Blake wasn't acting alone, who was pulling the strings all along? The willow tree had grown wild since Savannah left. Its branches no longer drooped softly. They reached low and wide, as if trying to hold on to something it could never quite touch. Moss clung to the bark. The wind didn't move it. It swayed on its own, as if haunted by memories. Savannah stood beneath it, arms crossed, stomach tight. Not from the baby, but from everything that had never been said. Behind her, Evelyn approached with a pace that said she didn't know if she should come closer or turn back. "Do you remember who planted it?" Evelyn asked. Savannah didn't answer. She just stared at the soil. Evelyn didn't wait for permission. She stepped beside her daughter and pointed to the base of the trunk, where the initials SC were still carved into the bark. "You were 6 pounds, 1 ounce. I thought this tree would grow with you." Savannah bit her lip. "Then why did it feel like you watered the tree and forgot me?" The question hung there. Dense, heavy, thicker than the Texas humidity. Evelyn looked down, her voice brittle. "Because I thought if the roots were strong enough, maybe they'd hold us together. But I didn't realize I was the one pushing you away." "You didn't just push," Savannah said. Her voice cracked. "You shut the door, and locked it, and threw away the key. I didn't know how to protect you from what was coming," Evelyn whispered. "So I shut you out. I told myself I was being strong, that if I cried in front of you, you'd carry my grief too. And God knows, you were already carrying enough." Savannah turned, slowly, her eyes brimming with a truth she'd buried too long. "Do you think not crying made me stronger? Do you think I didn't see how scared you were?" A gust of wind shook the branches above them, raining down a handful of dried leaves that twirled between their feet like warnings from the past. Then, a small hand slid between theirs. Landon. Neither woman had seen him approach. He didn't say anything, just stood there with a grip tighter than his size should allow. One hand holding Savannah, the other clutching Evelyn's. Evelyn knelt to face him. Her knees cracked beneath her weight, but her eyes, when she looked up at her daughter, were sharper than they had been in years. "I made mistakes, baby girl," she said. "Some so big, I still hear them echo when I try to sleep. But never, not for a single second, did I stop loving you." Savannah blinked hard. Her lips parted, but no words came. Not yet, because something else was coming. From the corner of her eye, Savannah spotted a flash metallic. Near the barn, a shape, too tall to be Blake, too still to be a farmhand. Watching, her heart skipped. She stepped forward instinctively, shielding Landon with her arm. Evelyn followed her gaze. "Do you see that?" "Yes," Savannah said. They both stared, but the figure didn't move. Then, just like that, it vanished behind the sidewall. Savannah looked at Evelyn. Evelyn's jaw clenched. "Was that?" Savannah began, but Evelyn interrupted. "I hoped you'd never see him." Savannah froze. "You know who that is?" Evelyn looked at her, trembling. "He's the reason your father left. He's the reason I made every bad decision after. And he's not done with us." Savannah's pulse surged. Her fingers curled tighter around Landon's. "What are you talking about?" "I try to bury it. Bury him. But some things don't stay buried." The willow above them groaned, as if answering a question no one dared ask. And now, Savannah had one more. Not about forgiveness. Not about the past. But about what danger was still walking this land, and why Evelyn had spent 2 decades pretending it didn't exist. The grass was brittle beneath Savannah's boots, snapping with every slow, uncertain step. The air was dry, silent in that kind of way where every sound feels like it might be the last before something breaks. She didn't realize her hand was trembling until she tried to reach for Landon's shoulder and pulled back instead. Her son stood only a few feet away, Evelyn just behind him. They were close enough to touch, but something in her felt further than ever. And then came the sound. Hooves. Not rushed, not panicked, deliberate. 1, 2, pause. Then again. Savannah turned. Ash was walking toward them, but he didn't carry himself the way a horse should. Not like the fearless stallion who had once faced down Blake without flinching. Not like the animal who had been her shelter in the storm. This was different. He looked tired. No, he looked aware. As he moved through the patch of dying grass, Savannah noticed the way his ears tilted, first toward her, then toward Evelyn, then back to Landon, as if trying to understand which pain needed answering first. He stopped just in front of her. Savannah stared, her pulse quickening. Ash didn't rear, didn't whinny. He did something much quieter and much more impossible. He bowed. He lowered his head slowly, as if the weight of everything he'd witnessed finally pushed him to do what no human in that family had yet dared. He pressed his forehead to Savannah's shoulder. The contact was warm and strangely grounding. She hadn't realized how numb she'd been until that exact moment. Something about it melted the wall behind her ribs, the one she'd kept up for years without noticing. She closed her eyes, and just for a breath, she let herself lean into the moment. Into him. Ash didn't flinch. He stayed still as if he were guarding something sacred. Not just her, but this, the very choice to trust again. Then, Landon's voice, soft, small, cut through the stillness. Why does he do that only for you? Savannah opened her eyes. Evelyn, too, looked stunned. Her eyes glistened with something caught between reverence and regret. Savannah didn't answer immediately. How could she? How do you explain that a horse might see more than people ever do? But before she could speak, Ash shifted. Not violently, not alarmed. Just enough for Savannah to notice his gaze had shifted, past her, past Evelyn, toward the ridge behind the barn. And then she saw it again. A shape, a man, the same one from the side of the barn. Watching, waiting. Only this time, Ash reacted. He raised his head slowly, ears pinned back, muscles tense, but he didn't charge. He stayed where he was, a living shield between Savannah and the unknown. Savannah stepped forward slightly. Her breath caught. "Is it him?" she whispered. Evelyn didn't answer. Landon, sensing the unease, reached for her hand. The figure didn't move. Not right away, but just when Savannah thought it might have been her imagination. The man lifted something shiny from his side. A badge. A badge? Not a weapon. Not a threat. Then why the fear in Evelyn's face? Savannah turned to her mother. "You lied. You said he was the reason Dad left. That he was dangerous." Evelyn's voice was almost inaudible. "He is, but not in the way you think." "What does that mean?" Savannah snapped. Evelyn looked at her, pain etched deep. "He's not a threat to your life, Savannah. He's a threat to your truth." Savannah felt the ground shift beneath her, figuratively, but so intensely it nearly felt real. "What truth?" Evelyn didn't answer, but Ash took a step closer to the man. He didn't show fear. He showed recognition. And suddenly, the question wasn't, "Who is that man?" anymore. It was, why does Ash know him? And what part of Savannah's past had been hidden not just by her mother, but by every voice that had once claimed to love her? And what if the one person she trusted most had known the truth all along? The attic creaked under Evelyn's slow steps. Dust hung in the air like forgotten promises, suspended in golden shafts of light that filtered through the wooden slats above her. The silence up there wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like it had been waiting for her. She hesitated before kneeling beside the old cedar, trunk tucked in the corner. It hadn't been opened in years. The key still hung from a rusted chain around her neck, a chain she hadn't removed since Savannah left. Her fingers trembled as she turned the key, not from age, from knowing exactly what was inside. The lid groaned open, and the scent of old paper, dried ink, and time hit her like a memory she hadn't earned the right to forget. There they were, letters, dozens of them, all written to Savannah. None sent. Some were angry, scrawled in desperate script, smudged with something that might have been rain or regret. Others were soft, almost apologetic, written in the kind of cursive that only appeared when someone wanted desperately to sound braver than they felt. Evelyn picked one up, then another, then another. She read a sentence from the one dated the day Savannah turned 21. You won't read this because I won't send it, but I needed to say I saw the fire in your eyes when you left, and I wasn't strong enough to admit it came from me. Her throat tightened. She wasn't crying. She was drowning. Behind her, the floorboards creaked. Landon stood in the doorway, arms crossed, shoulders drawn tight like he'd seen something he wasn't supposed to, but didn't know how to look away. How long have those been here? He asked, voice barely more than breath. Evelyn didn't turn. Since before you were born. Why didn't you send them? Her silence screamed louder than any words could. Landon took a few cautious steps into the attic. He looked at the open chest, then at the letters in her lap, then finally at her. Do you still write them? She nodded. That answer didn't satisfy him. Nothing about this moment should have satisfied anyone. She reached into the box and pulled out a thin bundle tied with faded blue ribbon. It wasn't elegant. It was raw. Paper edges curled, some torn, some stained. She handed it to him with both hands, like passing a piece of herself she never knew how to hold properly. Maybe it's not me who'll know when she's ready to read these, Evelyn said, staring straight into his eyes. Maybe it's you. Landon hesitated before accepting the bundle. What if I never find the right moment? Evelyn's response was immediate. Then you wait, but keep them close, because when it comes, you'll feel it before you understand it. He looked down at the bundle, thumbing the corner of the top letter. The name, Savannah, stared back at him in ink that looked too alive to be this old. But the questions were far from over. Why had Evelyn written so many letters, yet never found the courage to send a single one? Was it guilt? Or was it fear of what they might reveal? What if those letters weren't just apologies, but confessions? And what if one of them held the answer Savannah had been chasing her entire life, without even knowing the question? Landon's eyes drifted to the far end of the attic, where a second trunk sat half-buried under a worn quilt. He hadn't noticed it before. Neither had Evelyn. Not in years. But something about it now. Its shape, the faint initials carved into the lid, froze him in place. The letters weren't the only thing hidden in this attic. And if those initials belonged to who he thought they did, then the truth wasn't just unfinished. It was buried. And someone had gone to great lengths to make sure it stayed that way. The coffee hadn't even finished brewing when Savannah entered the kitchen, her footsteps quiet but deliberate. The wooden floor creaked, but neither woman flinched. Evelyn stood by the sink, back straight, spine rigid as if years of silence had taught her to carry regret with discipline. Steam curled from the pot like something alive, fragile, temporary, just like this moment. It was cold that morning, not the kind of cold that bites the skin, but the kind that settles in bones. The kind that feels like it's been waiting for you. For years, Savannah pulled out a chair. Not the one she used to sit in as a girl. That one was gone, burned in a fire no one ever talked about. One Evelyn claimed was accidental. But everyone in town remembered the night Savannah left. The flames were too high for coincidence. Evelyn poured 2 mugs. Not a word. Just that. Black. No sugar. The way Savannah always drank it, before she started pretending to like lattes in Austin. Before she started pretending to be someone else. Was this peace? Or just a pause? Savannah blew on her coffee. Her hands shook slightly. Evelyn noticed, but said nothing. Then Savannah broke the silence with a voice that didn't quite belong to the woman she used to be, or the one she'd tried to become. We start with coffee. Then we see where it goes. The words floated there for a moment. Not an olive branch. Not a truce. Just truth. Raw and bitter. Evelyn didn't smile, but she nodded. That was the most honest thing they'd shared in a decade. They both sipped. Then Evelyn reached into the drawer next to the stove. Slowly, deliberately, Savannah tensed, not visibly, but enough that the air shifted. The last time someone reached into a drawer that way, her ex-husband had shattered a plate against the wall 3 seconds later. But Evelyn didn't pull out a knife. She pulled out a photograph. Folded, faded, torn at the edges. She slid it across the table. Savannah stared. It was her, 7 years old, on Ash's back, her father holding the reins. Evelyn, in the background, not smiling, but watching. Always watching. You kept this. Savannah's voice cracked before she could hide it. Almost burned it, Evelyn admitted. Twice. Why didn't you? Evelyn looked at her directly, and for the first time since Savannah came back, didn't look away. Because it hurt more to forget. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't cruel either. Then Savannah leaned forward just slightly. Why did you lie about Dad that night? Evelyn blinked, but only once. What makes you think I lied? He didn't run. He wouldn't. I found his truck keys in your room. The mug in Evelyn's hand shook just a little. That's when Savannah knew. There had always been something off about the night he disappeared. The fire. The way Evelyn didn't search. The way she locked her door for weeks. Now she had confirmation, but not the full truth. Not yet. Evelyn stood. She walked to the back door. Opened it. Let the cold morning air roll in like a challenge. There are things you're not ready to hear. And who decides that? Savannah's voice sharpened. You do, Evelyn said. But only when you're willing to stop asking questions just to prove I'm a monster. Savannah stood too. I'm not here for revenge, she said. But I won't build something new if it's sitting on lies. Evelyn didn't turn around. Then dig. But you better be sure you're ready for what you'll find. Outside, Ash stirred in the pasture. His ears perked toward the house. Inside, 2 women stood on opposite sides of a table that had once been the center of their world. One of them held a mug full of questions. The other held answers she wasn't sure she could survive saying aloud. But how much truth is too much? And what happens when you find out the person you blamed was actually protecting you from something worse? Something still out there? And still watching? Oh, ChatGPT. The morning hadn't broken yet. Not really. It just hinted at it, bleeding a pale light through the slats of the old barn. The kind of light that didn't ask for permission, just slowly replaced the dark. Landon stood at the entrance, his silhouette a little too tall for a 16-year-old, but still carrying the weight of a child who had grown up keeping secrets for adults who never bothered to explain themselves. He clutched a metal pail in one hand, the oats rattling softly with each step. The old boards under his boots gave way with gentle cracks. But Ash didn't stir. The stallion stood like a statue in the far corner, his brown coat catching the dawn as if the sun had come to him first. You waited, huh? Landon whispered, stepping closer. Or maybe you knew I needed to be the one to feed you this morning. Ash turned slowly, eyes fixed on the boy. There was something in that gaze, something that didn't belong to any ordinary animal. It was steady, like he was listening, not just with his ears, but with something deeper. Landon poured the oats into the trough, then leaned his back against the wooden beam and slid to the floor. His jeans caught straw. His hoodie smelled like firewood and regret. He watched the horse eat, but his voice trembled slightly when he finally spoke again. They think I don't know what's happening, that I'm just a kid in the middle of all this. A pause, but I see everything. I saw what happened that night Dad disappeared. I saw the blood on the porch. Ash didn't move, just kept chewing slowly. Landon swallowed. You were there too, weren't you? Silence, but a silence that felt full. The kind that dares you to keep talking. Landon rubbed his fingers over a knot in the beam beside him. They won't say it, but I know Mom's afraid. I hear her crying when she thinks I'm asleep. I hear Evelyn pacing the kitchen like she's waiting for something or someone to show up. He looked up at Ash again. You're not just a horse, are you? The stallion blinked. And then, Softly, so softly it could have been imagined, he stepped closer, one hoof at a time, like he was responding to something unspoken. When Ash reached him, Landon didn't flinch. Instead, he raised a hand, and Ash lowered his massive head, gently resting it on the boy's shoulder. It wasn't instinct. It wasn't training. It was understanding. "You're what's been missing," Landon whispered into the horse's neck. "You're the part none dealies have the words for." He closed his eyes, but then Ash lifted his head suddenly, ears pinned back. A low breath shot through his nostrils. Landon tensed. "What? What is it?" The barn door creaked behind them. Landon turned sharply. Nothing. Just wind. Or was it? He stood quickly, heart racing. "Ash, do you hear that?" No answer. Because horses don't talk, right? But Ash didn't move from the boy's side. Didn't go back to the oats. Didn't relax. He was waiting. Protecting. Landon's eyes darted around the barn. Someone's been in here before. Evelyn locked this place for years after Dad vanished. Why'd she open it yesterday like it was nothing? Then he noticed something near the far post. A box. Wooden. Half covered by an old saddle. He hadn't seen it before. Landon took a cautious step toward it. "Stay here," he told Ash. Ash didn't listen. He followed, steady and close. The box wasn't locked, but it had initials carved into the side. Not Evelyn's. Not Savannah's. J.W. Jacob Whitmore. His grandfather. Dead for 22 years. Landon knelt and opened it slowly. Inside, photos, a belt buckle, an old revolver, and a letter addressed not to Evelyn, but to Savannah, unopened, dated 2 months before Jacob's supposed death. Landon's throat tightened. His fingers hovered over the envelope. Why did no one tell me he wrote to her? He turned the letter over. The back wasn't sealed, and the handwriting wasn't Jacob's. It was Evelyn's. Why would she write in his name? Landon whispered. Ash stomped once. Loud, like punctuation. Then again, Landon looked up, suddenly cold despite the sun rising outside. What if this wasn't just about Savannah's return? What if Evelyn had been hiding more than pain? What if the reason Ash acted like he understood everything was because he'd seen it all before? Because he remembered? Because he was never supposed to still be here? Because some animals don't forget. Not people, not crimes, not lies. So now, what does a boy do when the only one telling him the truth is a creature who can't speak? Or can he? And if he can't trust his own family, can he trust a horse with a soul that feels older than time? The baby's room wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. There were no pastel walls, no crib carved with love, no garlands or gentle mobiles swaying above a changing table. Just a makeshift bed in the corner, a second-hand rocking chair, and a bassinet salvage from the attic that still smelled faintly of cedar and time. But in the middle of it all, Savannah stood barefoot, one hand resting on the small of her back, the other holding a baby blanket that had belonged to no one. Yet, Landon leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed but shoulders tense. He wasn't sure why she called him in. They hadn't talked much since the letters, since the morning in the barn, since everything started unraveling, or maybe falling into place. "I need your opinion," Savannah said, not turning around. Landon frowned. "On what?" "Paint colors." She smiled, but there was no laughter in it. Just that ache she'd learned to carry without complaint. "Names." He blinked. "You wanted to help name the baby?" "No," she said softly. "I already chose them." That caught him off guard. Them. If it's a girl, her name will be Hope. Savannah finally turned, her eyes not on Landon, but the empty bassinet. Because she'll never have to wonder if she was wanted. Landon opened his mouth, closed it again. "And if it's a boy," she continued, "Elijah." "Why Elijah?" Her fingers moved slowly over the edge of the blanket, smoothing out imaginary creases. "Because that name has weight and dignity. Because it belonged to someone who saw too much and still kept walking." There was a silence between them that wasn't uncomfortable, but loaded, like stepping into a room and finding a truth waiting there patiently. Hope and Elijah, Landon repeated. Big names. Savannah looked up at him. They have to be. This baby isn't a bandage. It's not meant to cover what's been broken. It's meant to build something new. This child is the bridge, not the scar. Landon didn't speak for a long moment. He was watching her, really watching her, for the first time in years, maybe ever. Not just as his mother, or the woman who left and came back, or the one carrying secrets heavier than suitcases. Does Evelyn know? He asked carefully. She shook her head. Not yet. Another pause. Does Blake? Her jaw tightened just for a second. He doesn't get a vote anymore. The weight of that sentence hit the air like a falling book. Landon's chest burned with questions he didn't know how to shape. But one finally rose. What if he comes back? Savannah met his eyes. Then he'll find we're not the same people he left behind. The silence stretched again, and in that space, Landon stepped closer. He knelt beside the bassinet, ran his fingers along its edge. Do you think it's possible for someone like me to become something better? Or am I already too far shaped by everything that's happened? Savannah lowered herself slowly into the rocking chair with a wince. You're not shaped, Landon. You're still being written. He turned the thought over in his head. Still being written. Not ruined. Not locked into a single version of himself. Then, from outside, something snapped. Not a twig. Not an accident. A deliberate sound. Both of them froze. Savannah rose halfway, belly heavy, breath short. Did you lock the back door? Landon stood fast. I thought you did. Another sound. This time a creak, floorboard level from the hallway. He stepped out of the room, just as a shadow disappeared into the kitchen. Stay here, he whispered. Landon. But he was already moving. Each step was slow, controlled, the way I should taught him to walk through a barn without startling anything. He reached the kitchen. Empty, except the knife drawer was open, and one of the drawers beneath it, missing its contents. His heart raced. He spun back toward the hall and collided with a figure. Not a man, not Blake, but Evelyn. Pale, eyes wide. Her hands were shaking. What are you doing? Landon snapped. She didn't answer, just stared past him. That was you making noise. Still silence. He followed her gaze to the living room window. The curtain was moving, as if someone had just been there. Watching, Landon rushed forward, pulled it back. Nothing. No car in the driveway. No footprints. Just dust on the porch. Savannah entered behind them, one hand gripping the doorframe, the other holding her stomach protectively. What's going on? Landon turned, but his eyes were on Evelyn. Why won't you talk? She looked at him, lips trembling. Because if I do, I'll have to admit something I swore I'd never say out loud. What? That I lied about the fire. Everything stopped. What fire? Savannah's voice cracked. Evelyn looked at both of them, at the bassinet in the other room, then back at her daughter, the one that was supposed to take him. Savannah's face drained of color. Blake. Evelyn's voice dropped. No, your father. Landon couldn't breathe. Savannah staggered back, hand on her mouth. You told me he died in the woods. You said he was drunk. You said he ran. I did. Evelyn's hands were shaking harder now, because the truth would have destroyed everything. But why? Savannah's voice was rising. Because he didn't run, Evelyn whispered. He tried to take you with him. A beat, then another. Then Landon's voice, barely audible. But he died, didn't he? And Evelyn's eyes met his. That's the part I'm no longer sure about. The rain started quietly. No thunder. No wind that howled through broken trees. Just the soft, steady whisper of droplets against the rusted tin roof of Hollow Creek Ranch. For months, the sky had threatened. Clouds would gather, pregnant with promises, then drift away as if change was something earned, not granted. But today it fell. Savannah was on the porch when the first drop touched her hand. She didn't flinch. She just stared, unsure if it was real. After everything, was it possible the sky was finally listening? Inside the house, Evelyn glanced up from the sink. She had scrubbed that same plate 4 times. Not because it was dirty, but because her hands needed something to do. Her past couldn't be washed away with dish soap, and she knew it. But still she tried. The screen door creaked behind her. Landon stepped in, hair damp from the drizzle, boots coated in dust turned to mud. "It's raining," he said, voice low. "I heard." Evelyn set the plate down. "How long do you think it'll last?" "Long enough," he said, but his eyes didn't meet hers. "Not yet." Out in the barn, Ash shifted, sensing something more than weather. Horses know things, not in words, but in the way the ground breathes, the way pain hums in people's movements, the way lies cling to air. Landon didn't go back outside. He walked past Evelyn and toward the hall. He paused. "She told me about Dad." Evelyn turned. Her fingers curled tight around the edge of the counter. "Which part?" Landon looked back at her, and the weight in his stare was different now. Not just curiosity, not just anger, doubt. "You said he tried to take her, that there was a fire." "There was," she said, "but maybe not the way I said it." "Did you set it?" The question floated there. No accusation, just an open wound begging to know where it came from. Evelyn didn't answer. Not then. Savannah came in next, rain glistening on her skin. Her shirt clung to her body, her belly prominent, a symbol of everything moving forward and everything unresolved. "We need to talk," she said. "All of us." They sat at the old oak table, the one Blake once slammed his fist against, the one Evelyn had almost sold when things got too tight, too lonely. The same table where decisions were made and lives were reshaped. Savannah spoke first. "Blake is coming back." The silence dropped like a trapdoor. Evelyn's hand froze on her teacup. Landon's jaw locked. "I got the message this morning," Savannah said. "He's filed for partial custody. He's hired an attorney. He wants to be in the baby's life." "You told me he didn't get a vote anymore," Landon said. "I meant it," Savannah replied. "But legally, he thinks he has a right." "And does he?" Evelyn's voice cracked in a way no one expected. "No," Savannah said flatly. "Not after what he's done. Not after what he still denies." Landon stood. "Then we fight him." But Savannah didn't move. There was something else. Something in her eyes. "What?" Landon asked. "What aren't you saying?" "I saw him," she whispered. "Last week. At the diner in town. He didn't see me. But he wasn't alone." Evelyn leaned in. "Who was with him?" Savannah looked straight at her. "A woman. And a girl. About 6. Landon's brow furrowed. "You think he's—" "I don't know," she interrupted. "But she looked like him. And she looked like—" Savannah's voice trailed off. "She looked like you," Evelyn finished. A thunderbolt might have been quieter. "You think he's done this before?" Landon asked, horrified. "I don't know what I think," Savannah admitted. "But I know I'm not the only person he broke." Outside, the rain intensified. Ash neighed softly in the barn, unsettled, as if he could feel the shift in energy. Evelyn stood slowly. Her legs trembled. "I need to show you both something." She led them down to the cellar, a place neither Savannah nor Landon had entered in years. Dust clung to the steps. The bulb flickered when Evelyn pulled the chain. She moved to an old chest. The lock was broken long ago. Inside, letters. Dozens of them. Stained. Torn. Hidden. Savannah reached for one. It was addressed to her, but never sent. The handwriting. Not Evelyn's. Not Blake's. Landon whispered, "Dad." Evelyn nodded. "He tried to come back. Before Blake. Before all of this. I kept them from you. I was afraid. Afraid of the questions they'd raise. Questions like whether he died in that fire." Savannah's voice was thin. "Yes." They read them, one by one, each letter a ghost, each sentence a match to the gasoline they'd all been sitting on for years. He wasn't drunk. He didn't try to take her. He tried to save her. But someone else lit the match. Someone who thought the world was better without a man who couldn't control his rage. Landon's hands were shaking. Savannah stepped back. "You told me he was dangerous." "He was," Evelyn said, "but not in the way I let you believe." A rumble rolled in the distance. The rain slowed. The silence thickened. And then, a knock on the front door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Landon went up first. Savannah close behind. Evelyn trailed. He opened the door. A man stood there, soaked, gray in his beard, eyes that had seen too much. "I'm looking for Evelyn," he said. Savannah stepped forward, but Evelyn's voice rose from behind them. Quiet, strained. "I never thought you'd come back." The man took off his hat. "I never thought you'd still be alive." Then he looked at Savannah, and the world tilted. Because in his face, she didn't see pain. She saw herself. The needle moved slowly through the thick fabric, guided by fingers that trembled more from memory than cold. Savannah sat on the edge of an overturned feed bucket inside the stable, her back hunched, the uneven light from the hanging bulb above casting long shadows on the ground. Outside, night was falling. Inside, she wasn't just sewing a blanket. She was stitching a truth that no one else could say aloud. The fabric was an old military wool, the kind that had belonged to her grandfather. Sturdy, heavy, weathered like the men who'd worn it. But Savannah chose it for a different reason. Ash, the horse who stood quietly nearby, occasionally turning his head toward her like he somehow understood what she was doing, and maybe even why. 3 letters. Just 3. She pressed the tip of the needle against the edge and pulled the thread tight. The first was an S, her initial, then an L for Landon, then the third. She stopped. Her hand froze in midair. Who got to own that third letter? Would it be E for Evelyn, the woman she had hated, then pitted, then begun to see with new eyes? Or B for Blake, the man who had scarred them all, but still walked free, untouched by guilt or consequence? Or was it someone else entirely? Someone she hadn't dared to name yet? Behind her, Ash gave a short, almost impatient snort. Savannah smiled. "You're right," she said quietly. "It doesn't belong to them." She picked a new thread, dark red, like the blood she had hidden, like the pain she never wanted to name. And she stitched an H. Hope, the baby's name, if it was a girl. A name that wasn't about the past, but about what might still be possible. She stood and draped the blanket over Ash's back. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stood tall, like he was wearing armor forged from everything they had endured together. "You deserve it," she said, placing a palm against his neck. "You saved 3 lives." But as the words left her mouth, she felt the sharp sting of uncertainty. Because that wasn't entirely true. Ash hadn't just saved her, or Landon, or the baby. He had saved someone else. Someone who hadn't yet revealed themselves. Someone hiding in the shadows of this story. A name scratched into a letter never sent. A phone call that ended too soon. A face glimpsed once in a crowd and never forgotten. She turned to the stable door. The rain had stopped, but something inside her warned this wasn't peace. It was the silence before the storm finally showed its true face. Because why had the old sheriff left town just days before Blake resurfaced? Why had Evelyn buried not just letters, but an entire identity? And who was the man in the photograph Savannah had found beneath the floorboard last night, wearing her father's dog tags and standing beside Evelyn? Was her father the man she had been told he was? Or had she spent her entire life grieving someone who had never really left? Ash nudged her gently, snapping her out of the spiral. She looked at him, her voice firm. It's time to stop surviving. It's time to start asking the questions nobody wants answered. But what happens when the truth you dig up is more dangerous than the lie that buried it? And who do you become when you discover your past isn't just painful, it's been rewritten? She grabbed the bridle, but didn't lead Ash out yet. There was something else she had to face first. Something, or someone, waiting inside the house. Because not all ghosts are dead, and not all enemies wear their face in public. Sometimes, the person who destroyed everything is the one who thinks they saved you. And sometimes, the horse isn't the only one carrying a weight too heavy to speak of. But can a blanket stitched with love protect you from a truth sewn with betrayal? Oh, ChatGPT. The neon buzzed above the door, casting a flickering red glow over the gravel parking lot. A cockroach skittered across the concrete as a diesel truck growled past. leaving the air thick with fumes and heat. Inside room 8 of the Hollow Pines Motel, Blake Vasquez sat on the edge of a sagging mattress, still wearing the same shirt he'd put on 3 days ago. The collar was stained, the buttons undone. His boots, caked in dust, rested on a pile of unopened mail, half of it court threats, the other half memories he couldn't quite burn. On the scratch screen of his cracked phone, a video played on loop. Landon, laughing, not just laughing free. In the video, the boy leaned against Ash, his tiny hand gripping the horse's halter like he'd done his whole life. The camera shook, and Savannah's voice, muffled but clear, captured something raw. "He trusts you more than anyone, you know that?" Landon had nodded. "Because Ash doesn't lie." That part, that line, Blake had replayed it 17 times. And now again, "Because Ash doesn't lie." Blake let the phone fall onto the bedspread. His hand stayed in the air a second longer than it needed to, as if caught between gripping the past and letting it fall. How had it come to this? A man alone in a rented room, smelling of mildew and regret, watching a boy he claimed to love, learning to live without him. His thumb hovered over the call button. Savannah's name was still saved as save, back when she still answered. Back when his voice didn't make her flinch. He didn't press it. Instead, he reached into the drawer and pulled out the envelope he never mailed. Inside was a photo, creased, old, edges curling. It showed Blake, younger, standing beside Evelyn. Between them, a man with sunburned skin and ice in his eyes. Richard Cole, Savannah's father. A man she believed had died when she was 10. But what if he hadn't? Blake swallowed hard, staring at that frozen image. His fingers trembled now. Not from age or sickness, but something worse, doubt. He had convinced himself for years that power was protection. That control was the only form of love that couldn't be taken away. But in that video, Landon's joy didn't look like something stolen. It looked like something earned. And suddenly, Blake wasn't sure anymore. Not about the letters Evelyn burned. Not about the night Savannah fell down the stairs. Not even about his own place in this story. Could it be that he wasn't the protector? Could it be that he was the storm? He looked back to the phone. The video had stopped. The screen now showed a still frame. Landon hugging Ash, his eyes closed in peace. Blake's voice caught in his throat. "Not all power's worth the cost," he said under his breath. But then he heard a knock. Not loud, not frantic, but calculated. 3 precise taps. He stiffened. No one knew he was here. He stood, gun tucked in the waistband out of habit. Moved to the peephole. But what he saw wasn't possible. It was a boy, not Landon. Older, maybe 17. Same dark curls. Same jawline. Same eyes. But Blake knew, without a shadow of doubt. He was looking at someone from the photo. Someone who should be long dead. His heart pounded. Was it a trick? Or was the past knocking on the door? Not to revisit, but to collect? He opened the drawer again. This time, not for the photo, but for the second envelope. The one labeled only with a single word. Testimony. And inside it, a confession. But whose? And why did the return address say Texas State Correctional Facility? What secret had he buried so deep even Savannah never knew? And the bigger question, why was it surfacing now? Why was the past no longer afraid of daylight? And who had sent that boy? Who was he really? Blake stepped back from the door, the weight of everything he thought he controlled now pressing against his lungs. Because when powers start to crack, what rushes in first? Regret or revenge? The wind was warm, but it carried the scent of something deeper, like soil right before it gives way to roots. Landon stood at the old wrought iron gate of Hollow Creek Ranch, his fingers tracing the cold metal before lifting the photo from the inside pocket of his flannel jacket. The paper was slightly crumpled, a faint fingerprint smudged across the corner. But the image was intact. 4 figures. Savannah, her eyes weary, but open in a way they hadn't been in years. Evelyn, her expression caught mid-laugh, the kind of laugh that only happens when no one's looking. Ash, calm, noble, standing between them like a silent witness to every truth they'd ever tried to bury. And Landon, a little off-center, as if he didn't quite believe he belonged, but didn't want to leave. He stared at it for a long time. What made something real? Was it memory? Proof? Or was it what you chose to fight for, even when everyone told you it wasn't yours? He pulled a nail from his pocket, a hammer from his belt, and drove it into the wood. The sound echoed, just once, like a stamp on a verdict. Then came the small wooden sign, burned into its surface, simple but deliberate. Family isn't blood. It's courage. The wind shifted again. Behind him, the screen door creaked open. Savannah watched in silence, one hand resting on her side. The other, bandaged from stitching the blanket for Ash, dangled at her side like it no longer belonged to the same woman who once ran from this land. She didn't speak. Neither did Evelyn, who appeared moments later, her cane barely tapping the porch step as she took it all in. But something in Landon's posture had changed. He stood taller now, not because he was older, but because he'd seen things no child should see. He'd heard his mother cry alone in barns, watched a horse shield them from a man with fire in his hands, and, perhaps most painfully, he had learned what it means to love someone who wasn't ready to love themselves. And yet, he stayed. But just as he turned to walk back to the house, a truck rolled to a stop at the end of the driveway. It wasn't Blake's. At least, not the one he used to drive. This one was cleaner, dark green, no plates. A man stepped out. He looked like he belonged in a courtroom, not on a dirt road. But he held something in his hand that made Savannah freeze instantly. A folder, one Landon had seen before. It was the same type that arrived the day before Evelyn burned the letters. But this time, there was no fire. The man called out, not loud, not soft, just firm enough to be real. I believe this belongs to your mother. He handed it to Landon, who felt the weight of it like it was made of stone. Inside, a single sheet, a record, Savannah's birth certificate. But beneath it, clipped by a rusted paper clip, was another document. A DNA test, 2 names circled. Neither of them belonged to the man she thought was her father. And the second name? Landon recognized it instantly. It was the man who came to Blake's door 2 nights ago. But how was he tied to them? And more importantly, why was his name also listed as biological match? A match for both Savannah and Landon? Was it a lie? A cover-up? Or had the story of Hollow Creek always been built on more than silence and secrets? Landon stared back at the photo he'd just nailed to the gate. 4 souls, 1 horse, and now the shadow of another truth. What if family wasn't just built on courage? What if it was also built on betrayal? And was he ready to learn which one ran deeper? The golden light stretched across the field like it was holding its breath. Ash stood at the edge of the pasture, his dark coat glinting like it had been dipped in bronze. The sun behind him cast his shadow across the dirt path Savannah once ran down as a child, barefoot, reckless, free. Now that same path held boot prints, some hers, some Evelyn's, some newer, smaller. Landon's. The ranch was quiet, but not empty, and somehow that silence said more than any farewell ever could. Ash didn't move. He didn't need to. He just stood, head high, chest still rising and falling like he was listening to something the world had forgotten how to hear. Behind him, the wind nudged the old swing hanging from the porch beam. It creaked once, then once more, like it remembered being pushed by Evelyn's husband before everything went wrong, before secrets festered in the barn, before Savannah disappeared into the world, looking for something she didn't even have a name for. But what if everything she ever needed had hooves? Savannah watched from the screen door, one hand gripping the frame. She hadn't spoken in hours, not since Landon asked the question no child should have to ask. Why did you stay with him if it hurts so much? And Evelyn had answered not with an excuse, but with a story. A story about a letter never mailed. A man who was supposed to be Savannah's real father. And a deal made in desperation that kept her in the hands of a man like Blake. Was love ever a real choice when survival had a price? But now, there was nothing left to confess. Just this, Ash standing where no man ever could, where no human had the patience to remain. Still, present, unmoved by blame or blood. The sky dimmed. A car engine started somewhere down the road. Blake's motel, key had been returned in a brown envelope. No note, just the key and a picture of Ash taped to the front. No one knew who left it, and maybe that was the final act of cowardice. Or maybe something else, because attached to the photo was a tiny ribbon, pink. Savannah hadn't told anyone she was having a girl. And yet, someone had known. Someone who wasn't ready to return, but wasn't ready to disappear either. Is forgiveness a door or a lock? She stepped down from the porch. Her boots hit the dirt with the sound of someone choosing to stay. Not because she had to, because she wanted to. Ash turned his head, only slightly, but it was enough. Savannah reached his side and laid her hand on his neck. The heat of him, the weight, the steadiness, it was more real than anything she'd touched in years. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely breaking the quiet, "for never running when the rest of us did." He blinked, and in that moment she wondered, was he just a horse? Or had he always been more? Was there ever a chance that someone had been watching all along, choosing to act not with words or weapons, but with silent, stubborn presence? And if miracles didn't fall from the sky, could they stand right in front of you? No wings, just hooves. The wind carried the last light of the day across the fields. Ash didn't move. He didn't need to. He was the ending. But also, somehow, he was the beginning of something none of them could explain. And perhaps the most haunting question of all lingered like dust in the air. What if the thing that saved them never needed to speak because it already knew the truth? What if the miracles in your life are already right beside you, but you just haven't recognized them yet? Savannah only understood the weight of true courage when she stopped running. Landon only felt the meaning of real family when he looked into Ash's eyes and saw strength where words had always failed. And Evelyn, she learned that time doesn't heal. What heals is choosing to act before it's too late. But what about you? What would you do if the one mistake you regret most turned out to be your final chance to save everything that matters? Have you ever pushed someone away who only needed you to stay, or ignored a clear sign from life just because it looked too ordinary to be a miracle? Drop a comment below and tell us which moment of this story moved you the most, or what decision you feel inspired to make after witnessing Savannah, Evelyn, and Landon face their truths. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs quiet hope, the kind that doesn't scream, but changes everything. And if you want more stories that stir your soul, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and join us on this path of storytelling that truly matters. Because not every miracle has wings. Sometimes it has hooves, and it waits where you least expect it. We're here telling stories that could just as easily be yours. Are you ready to listen, or will you let another moment slip away?